So obviously you do it for yourself, but really I think that I've been armed with tools and knowledge over the years, my 30-year career, that I kind of have a decent sense of where the world is going, where the opportunities lie, and where the risk lies for people. And I can see the problems people are facing, and I think I've got answers. So what I want to do is help as many people as possible in that journey. And why that happened to me was I was in Spain back in 2012, and also during the financial crisis 2008. And I was writing macroeconomic research for my research service, Global Macro Investor, and I had seen it coming. I predicted it. I knew it was coming. I knew the problems. I warned all of my friends. Nobody listened. Nobody understood about the financial crisis, what was going to happen. And most of them, because I was living in a beach town in Spain, they were in real estate. They all went bust. But worse than that was that when we got to the European crisis, when basically the governments of Europe ran out of money, the banks also ran out of money. And as opposed to being bailed out, they got what known as bailed in, which means that they took your savings to pay the debtors. And friends of my parents and friends of friends were wiped out. And they were like, why didn't we know? I'm like, that was a question that sat with me for a while. Why didn't we know? And I saw that everybody had lost total faith in the system. So Occupy Wall Street happened at the same period. And it was people angry. It's like, we thought money in the bank was safe. We thought our house was safe. We thought the system was there for us. And suddenly they all wake up and realize the system was not there for them. It was actually for other people. You know, people talk about bankers never went to jail. No, there was that sense that it was never concluded. You see, we all have the root of unhappiness and happiness often comes from, does your vision of your future self match where you are today? Can you see that path? Whether that's finances, whether it's health, they're all very similar journeys. And when people can't see the vision of their future self, and they can't see how to get there, they get upset. And what we've tried to do is unfuck people's future, which is an expression we use, which is a mimetic or a meme or just a short phraseology to help people understand. We understand that you feel like you can't get to where you want to get to, but there are options to do it. And I think people are immensely grateful for that in general.
Can you explain to me specifically the things that stand the chance of fucking their future from a macro perspective?
And we can dig into why these things have occurred. But generally speaking, wages in real terms, adjusted for inflation, haven't gone up for decades. So nobody's getting richer. If you're an American, you have this powerful meme, which is the American dream. But that is not a reality for most people. The reality is you grind it out. Your savings are not worth what you thought they'd be. This whole promise of your pension and swanning around on a cruise ship around the Caribbean when you're older, living in a nice house, none of that is true. And it's because wages haven't gone up. So, okay, so let's cut to somebody who's in their 30s now, because this is the really important cohort, I think, for this. They can't afford to buy a house. If I go back to when I was 30, I bought a house in London, and it was a nice place in a good area, and it was 3.5 times salary. Yes, I was in finance. I was earning a high salary. You can't buy anything for 3.5 times your salary. Now that same place, if I took the same kind of young investment banker salary, is probably 8 or 10 times. So it's tripled in how expensive it is to just buy your first house. So what is a house? Firstly, it's your quality of life, particularly, in England, the UK, in the US, we're home buyers. We think of our home as our castle. It's like the thing that solidifies our security. But, if you're in Germany, for example, they rent. But if we think about the mindset of owning a house, It's an asset that you can then pass on, or you can sell if you need to. And an asset is really a future savings plan. It's something you save now that in the future you can consume, you can buy stuff with. But what you're doing is, for the average 35-year-old, the average millennial is 36 years old. They can't afford to buy the house. So therefore, their future self is poorer. If they think of how much of the stock market they can buy less with their money. They have less savings. They've got debts from university. So they don't have the ability to get out of this trap. And then what we are finding is, because of this, they're having to live with other people into their 30s. They don't have kids, and they don't get married. And these numbers have collapsed since 1983. You've seen these numbers come down from people living on their own. So i.e., you could get your job, get yourself an apartment, has gone from 80% to 62%. You're seeing the marriage rate halve. You're seeing the home ownership rate go from 50% to 30%. These are all expressions of the same problems, which is people know their future is fucked and they can feel it. They have a sense of desperation. You see then the same cohort of kids in their 30s doing 2 jobs, 3 jobs, 4 jobs. That's not because they want to. Nobody wants to work 12-hour days, 7 days a week. It's because they have to. And their parents, the baby boomers, who are in their 70s and retiring, never had that. They were the richest generation the world had ever seen. So this is the first generation that won't be as rich as their parents. And that's a weird thing, because we're all used to human progress, the American dream. If the American dream is, well, you'll never be as wealthy as your parents, and they were middle-class people, and I'm now less well off than them, that's kind of fucked. So look, here's some stats about a 30-year-old today versus a 30-year-old in 1983. So a 30-year-old in 1983, 85% of them lived on their own. They could afford a house or an apartment to rent or to buy. Now it's 64%. So people are having to live with other people. Marriage rates, they've gone from 80% of 30-year-olds in 1983 who were married to 47% now. Having kids, gone from 60% to 32%. Population growth is collapsing because people can't afford it. And home ownership for a 30-year-old has gone from 50% to 32%. It just shows that dramatic change that's happened over the decades, and why each generation has found it more and more difficult to be like their parents. The first part of the game is income.
Okay.
Without income, you don't have the cash to do the other things, to invest or to look for opportunities. So first thing is income. But even that's changing in how we earn incomes these days. You know, it used to be you go and work for a big firm, you get paid, you get the benefit. That's all going, and nobody wants to do it. So you kind of end up having to be an entrepreneur, work 2 or 3 different things. The point being, if you're 20s, do all of that. Work day and night.
Really?
Do as many things, learn as much as you can, fail as often as possible.
What about work-life balance in your 20s?
Fuck it. Because that's the time to put in the hard work. Your work-life balance actually comes out later. I'm a big believer in, yes, if you're straight out of university, go traveling for a year or 2. You know, that A, gets rid of the pent-up need, but also gives you a much broader perspective on the world than any other single thing that you can do in your life. After that, you get your head down, and you get your head down probably till your mid-30s.
So to make sure I and everyone listening understands what the blockchain is, it's this public, can think of it as this database in the sky, and the database in the sky is checked by everybody who has their computer on and is interacting with the database in the sky.
And so that as a technology solves many things, problems that we don't even know we've got because they're so part of how we exist. So the technology is not about money. The technology is about truth and exchanging value and creating value in a digital age. Now, what is interesting and powerful about this technology is we've seen technologies similar before. The internet. We've seen broadband. We've seen these big global infrastructure things. Most of those, the internet was a public service good. Broadband was all built private sector. We didn't get to make money out of these things, really. Amazon made the money, or whoever it was building the broadband, they all went bust as well. What we've got here is this very clever thing that everybody in this blockchain gets rewarded for the role that they play.
In maintaining the blockchain.
In maintaining the blockchain. And because these things are scarce, and let's say Bitcoin being the most classic example, there's only 21 million that will ever exist. You've created this scarce asset that is a reward system. So the people who mine the Bitcoin, they use the electricity to solve the algorithm to get the Bitcoins to make sure there's only 21 million. Well, they get rewarded. The people who verify the chain get rewarded. And then we can buy the asset, which is actually us investing in the future use cases of this thing. Are people going to use it for storing wealth or building stuff? So now you get this global infrastructure layer of which people can invest. Now, let's go back to the example of AI. AI, 99% of people listening to this will not be able to invest in it, apart from buying some of those big public companies. Because they're not accredited investors, they're not allowed, they don't get to see it, it's an insider, all of this stuff. This is the inverse. It is fractionalizable. So a Bitcoin, you don't have to buy one at 60 whatever thousand it is today. You can buy a fraction. None of us can buy the $50 million apartment in Manhattan and then do it up and flip it for 250 million. Now, blockchain, we can all put 10% of our paycheck in it.
Do you think people should?
Yeah, and more. But the point being is this is the only globally homogeneous asset on Earth. It's the same in Nigeria as it is in Brazil, as it is in London, as it is in Silicon Valley, as it is in India, as it is in Papua New Guinea. And everybody is on an equal footing. You can put the same percentage of your worth in it.
Okay, I'm going to ask you for a price prediction.
The best thing I can say to people is, listen, 2032, 2034, that is not long away, 10 years. This asset class is going to go from 2 trillion to 100 trillion, right? That is a huge return. Now, some of the coins in that space will do a multiple of that. That simple thesis is why I built XPAM, the asset management company, Exponential Age, was just to capture this trend, to let, well, unfortunately it's only for high net worth investors and institutional investors, but just let them go on that journey, get the hedge funds to take the risk and figure it out and do that. But if people just do that, give me 10 years, just give me 10 years. And if you do it 10 years and you're sensible, you'll be able to take a whole chunk of money out every few years because it's quite cyclical. It moves maybe every 4 years. And so you can take a chunk out, cash it in the lifestyle bank, and keep moving towards that goal.